Ever wondered what makes up the human papillomavirus, or HPV? Well, let's dive right in. HPV is a tiny player with a big impact. Think of it as a small, non-enveloped, double-stranded DNA virus that's part of the Papillomaviridae family. But what does this mean? Simply put, it's a tiny virus without an outer protective layer, and it carries its genetic information in a double helix of DNA. Now let's turn to the viral genome, the complete set of genes or genetic material present in the virus. HPV's genome is divided into early and late genes. Of these, the E6 and E7 genes take center stage as the major oncogenes. Oncogenes, for those not in the know, are genes that have the potential to cause cancer. So, the structure and genome of HPV set the foundation for its life cycle and oncogenic mechanisms. Stay with us as we delve deeper into these fascinating aspects in the next scene. Now, how does HPV infect cells and what does its life cycle look like? To begin, let's understand that HPV doesn't just invade any cell. It has a particular liking for basal epithelial cells, the cells that line our body surfaces and cavities. How does it get there? Well, it's through the smallest of cuts, scrapes, or even microabrasions on our skin or mucous membranes. These tiny wounds are gateways for HPV, allowing it to reach and infect the basal epithelial cells. Now, here's where the HPV life cycle becomes fascinating. Unlike some viruses, HPV doesn't go on a rampage, killing cells left and right. Instead, it's a bit more cunning. The life cycle of HPV is tightly intertwined with the natural life cycle of its host cell. As the infected basal cell begins to differentiate or mature, so does the virus inside it. This process of differentiation allows the virus to replicate without causing immediate harm, making it a stealthy invader. As the infected cell continues to differentiate and move toward the surface of the skin or mucous membrane, the virus also progresses in its life cycle. It starts producing more viral particles which are eventually shed from the surface of the skin or mucous membrane, ready to infect new cells. This unique life cycle makes HPV a tricky virus to combat. It's not just about fighting a foreign invader, it's about untangling the intricate dance between the virus and our own cells. What makes HPV potentially cancer-causing? Well, the answer lies in its oncogenic mechanisms. The high-risk types of HPV, such as HPV-16 and HPV-18, produce two major oncoproteins named E6 and E7. These proteins have the ability to inactivate our body's natural tumor suppressor proteins, namely P53 and PRB. You can think of these suppressor proteins as the body's natural defense against uncontrolled cell growth. Now, when these defenses are taken down by E6 and E7, the normal cell cycle control and apoptotic pathways get disrupted. This disruption leads to unchecked cell proliferation and genomic instability. In simpler terms, the cells start to grow and divide at an abnormal rate, and the genetic material within these cells becomes unstable. These conditions are precisely what cancer cells need to thrive and grow. So, it's these oncogenic mechanisms that make HPV a high-risk virus. Opening: how does HPV spread and what factors increase the risk of infection? Now let's dive into how the human papillomavirus, or HPV, spreads. This crafty virus primarily transmits through direct skin-to-skin contact. It's most commonly passed on during vaginal, anal, or oral sex, making intimate contact a hotbed for HPV transmission. The virus isn't picky about where it takes up residence. It can infect the epithelial cells of numerous areas, such as the cervix, vagina, vulva, penis, anus, and the oropharynx, which includes the tonsils and tongue. Several factors can increase the risk of contracting HPV and HPV-related cancers. Early age at first sexual intercourse can be a risk factor. This is due to the likelihood of having more sexual partners over a lifetime, which in turn increases the chances of exposure to the virus. Speaking of sexual partners, having multiple partners also ups the risk. But it's not just about sex. Lifestyle choices like smoking can make you more susceptible too. And let's not forget about immunosuppression. Those with weakened immune systems may be more vulnerable to HPV infections and related complications. Now you might be thinking, surely our bodies can fight off this virus, right? In many cases, you'd be correct. Most HPV infections are transient and cleared by the immune system within 1 to 2 years. But in some instances, this sneaky virus can establish a persistent infection, lurking in your body and increasing the risk of precancerous lesions and cancer development. HPV isn't just good at hiding, it's also a master of evasion. It has developed mechanisms to dodge the host's immune response. This includes the downregulation of viral antigen expression and interference with antigen presentation and immune cell function. Yes, HPV is quite the crafty invader. Closing, understanding these infectious mechanisms is key to preventing HPV infection and its potential complications. By arming ourselves with knowledge, we can take steps to protect ourselves and others from this pervasive virus. After all, prevention is always better than cure. So, how can we prevent HPV infection and detect it early? One of the most effective methods of prevention is through vaccination. HPV vaccines such as Gardasil and Cervarix have proven to be instrumental in warding off infection from the most common high-risk HPV types. These are notably linked with cervical, anal, and oropharyngeal cancers. These vaccines work by stimulating the immune system to produce antibodies against the virus, reducing the likelihood of infection. Now, let's talk about early detection. Regular cervical cancer screenings play a significant role in early detection. This involves 2 key tests: PAP tests and HPV tests. A PAP test, or a pap smear, checks for changes in the cells of the cervix that might lead to cancer. It's primarily used to spot precancerous cervical lesions. On the other hand, an HPV test looks for the virus that can cause these cell changes. These screenings are crucial because they can detect precancerous cervical lesions before they develop into invasive cervical cancer. By catching these changes early, treatment can be started sooner, which significantly improves the chances of a successful outcome. In essence, the battle against HPV and its related cancers hinges on prevention and early detection. Vaccination and regular screenings are 2 powerful tools we have in our arsenal. With effective prevention and screening, we can significantly reduce the risk of HPV-related cancers. In summary, we've delved into the intricacies of HPV, from its double-stranded DNA structure to its life cycle intricately tied to host epithelial cells. We've explored the oncogenic mechanisms of E6 and E7 proteins and how they can disrupt cell control, leading to carcinogenesis. Furthermore, we've discussed infectious mechanisms, including transmission routes and viral persistence. Lastly, we touched on the importance of prevention and screening, emphasizing HPV vaccines and regular cervical cancer screenings. Understanding HPV is the first step towards preventing and combating HPV-related cancers.